You may not get a good offer at all, right? It's not about, is it 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, or 10 million, or I have a client who recently exited for over $30 million. It's more, you don't even get the offer at all.
Welcome to the Happy Clients Podcast, brought to you by Dot & Company. Whether you're a virtual assistant, an agency owner, or a client-facing account manager, we all deal with clients. Lucky for you, client management is what we do best. Now, let's dig in, chat cam life, and have some fun along the way. Cheers to happy clients.
E2M is a proud sponsor of the Happy Clients podcast. If you're running a digital agency, you know the hardest part isn't getting clients. It's delivering consistently without burning out your team or hurting margins. E2M helps agencies scale confidently as a behind-the-scenes, white-label fulfillment partner. From web development and SEO to paid media, US-based content, e-commerce, and even AI, they plug into your agency so your clients get great results under your brand. No freelancers, no chaos, just reliable delivery that helps you keep clients happy and growing. Find out how E2M can support your agency at e2msolutions.com/dot. Well, I am very thrilled to invite Carl Sakas back to the Happy Clients podcast. Welcome, Karl.
Taylor, great to be back.
Exciting. Today, we're going to dive into something that is a hot topic, not only for me, but also for a lot of the agency owners you're working with, Karl, which is being exit ready. So, Karl, tell us what that means to you and how agency owners are coming to you with this in mind, more so now than ever.
In my work across hundreds of agencies all over the world, there's been a thread around wanting the option to sell the agency. We could think of that as exit readiness. For some people, it's saying, I want to sell within a certain number of years for a certain amount of money. For others, it's more about having the option. And for some, it's having the optionality to step back and become the founder while someone runs the business for you. The common thread to all of that is exit readiness, which does require making yourself more optional in the agency day to day. Even if you never sell the agency, you're going to enjoy running things a lot more if you have an exit-ready business.
So what does being optional in your agency mean?
That will be unique to each agency, but ultimately the agency can function without you. Here's a good indicator. If you could take a 1-month sabbatical, everything would be fine when you got back. If, on the other hand, you're thinking 1 month, that sounds like not a sabbatical or a vacation, it sounds like some sort of punishment, that may be a sign that you're not quite exit ready yet. There could be multiple stages to it, as I wrote about in my book, Work Less, Earn More. Initially, you're mandatory for everything. Then you become necessary. Eventually, you become needed. Needed as you go on vacation for a week or two. Things generally run fine. And when you're optional, that fourth stage of things, then you could choose to step back. You could choose to sell. You could certainly enjoy your day-to-day a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can speak to that for sure. I was growing my agency to get it ready to sell. But I didn't really know how involved I could be, because what I heard on podcasts about selling your business was you basically need to be irrelevant. You need to be like, they don't even want you anymore, or else you're going to have to stay on as an employee. And that was what I was scared of. So what's your take on this? Like, how involved could you be to still exit without having to be an employee?
One of the key things is to stop being the day-to-day client contact for all of your clients. There tends to be continuum. In the early days, you're doing everything. And I think of 6 agency roles: account management, project management, your subject matter experts. You've also got biz dev, which is marketing, sales, and partnerships. You've got operations, and you also have client strategy. And the best bet for a lot of agencies is to certainly stop doing the subject matter expert work, design, the day-to-day marketing implementation, the development, that kind of thing, delegate project management, delegate account management. You might still continue doing client strategy, where you're no longer the day-to-day contact for the client, but they pull you in when it's time to do some sort of an initial strategy review, some sort of a quarterly check-in, an annual review, and things like that. You get to do the fun part rather than scheduling every single meeting or routing every single thing. So, from a transition standpoint, it makes sense if you're doing, say, client strategy. Eventually, though, you probably will step back from that. You might be doing some degree of marketing and partnerships, but you've delegated a lot of the other things there. One way to look at this, I had a client who wanted the option to sell his agency, and I looked at his website, and his name was on 7 out of the 10 latest blog posts. And I'm like, we got to flip that, right? It got to be, maybe 3 out of 10. I will say several years later, his name is now on 0 out of the last 10 blog posts. I looked recently, and he's hired a CEO, and we've helped him build a succession plan. But that's a case where clients kind of know of him, but they don't know him. And that's great for everyone involved.
Yep. I love it. And I feel like that was something that I felt like I had to get to as well, was being known. People,
Yes.
Clients know who I am, but they don't have direct access to me. And that was hard. That was hard to get to, because as an agency owner, you care so deeply
Yes.
about the success of your clients and of your team
Yes.
that a lot of agency owners step back in and they want to be in that client facing seat, even though they say they don't want to, even though they say they want to be exit ready. So why do you think that client management is one of the hardest things for agency owners to let go of?
Agencies are a client-driven business, right? If you didn't have clients, you wouldn't have an agency. And so I think it's important to recognize that client relationships are important, because if they don't happen, then you don't have the agency. But it also gets into recognizing about letting go, that other people can do a similar job of managing client relationships, or maybe even a better job. Right? If you're an agency owner, you're listening to this, and you are still working with clients, you've got a lot of things to do. There's client work, there's marketing, there's other business development. You might be involved in sales and partnerships. You're thinking about the strategy for the business as a whole. You've got other things you could do, and clients eventually can become a distraction. And clients are especially distracting because they're noisy, right? They're the squeaky wheel that's going to get the grease. So, some of it's a mindset. What do you want from the business? If you never want to sell your business, you're happy to run a full lifestyle business, don't want even the option to sell, continuing to be a client contact is fine. But you probably aren't going to be the contact for everyone always. For instance, I worked with a client several years ago where I'd helped him delegate more and more of his client relationships. He was down to 2 clients and finally down to 1 client out of the 20 to 30 clients his agency had. And one of his clients said, I really want to keep working with you. And my client, the owner, was like, well, what do I do? I'm okay working with them, but they're not paying enough. And I said, how much would you need from them to make it worth it? And he said $100,000 a month in revenue from just that one client. I said, okay, tell them that. Right? If they up their budget to $100,000 a month, you can continue, to work with them. And if they don't, that's great. You'll continue a strategy, but their new contact will be so-and-so. I checked in with him after his client conversation, and his client said yes to paying $100,000 a month.
Nice.
To keep the owner as the contact. I mean, okay, that was worth it. Now, years later, the end client, that is not the client contact anymore, but it was worth it at the time. And for people who are listening, if you've got a client that is demanding to work with you and you don't want to work with them, and they're paying you, $10,000 a month, they're not paying you enough. If they're paying you $100,000 a month, okay, maybe. But make sure it is worth it. And part of that reset is, if they want to keep you as a contact, they're going to have to pay more. If they don't want to pay more, totally fine. You have someone else who is competent to take care of them. Of course, you need someone who has the competence and the availability and the desire to work with the client. That can be the hard part if you don't have them on board already. But of course, that's where your firm comes in.
So that covers the letting go piece.
Yes.
How does this translate into valuation of your agency? So if you're thinking, okay, I might get rid of account management one of these days and that might help, but what are you seeing on the actual valuation side of like the real numbers of letting go of account management?
Part of it is higher valuation through delegating clients. It's also worth considering that you may not get a good offer at all, right? It's not about, is it 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, or 10 million, or I have a client who recently exited for over $30 million. It's more, you don't even get the offer at all, right? You might have an initial conversation with someone and they're asking questions, and in part, they're trying to sort out how optional are you in the agency. They may not ask that directly. They're trying to suss it out. If they get the impression that all of the pipeline relies on you and all of the core client relationships rely on you, they're not even going to do a letter of intent. Like they're just going to be like, well, nice talking with you. We'll stay in touch, and then they don't. So some of it's a binary of, do you even get an offer or not? And as I think about clients who have sold, I've been helping agencies with exit readiness going back to 2014. That first client who then sold 2 years later came back several years after that, once her non-compete expired and she started a new agency. But as I think about agencies who exit, every single owner has delegated the client relationships. The one exception is more acqui-hire exits, where you're taking on a job with the new firm and the valuation isn't as high as more of a standalone situation. But in terms of significant multi-million-dollar or tens of millions of dollars or more, the owner has delegated client relationships in 100% of the situations.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think that was my biggest fear, was that I'd have to have a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
And it is normal. Occasionally I hear from people saying, I don't want to be there at all. I'm like, okay, but that is going to lower the valuation you get. You're probably going to get a good ROI valuation-wise if you're committing for a year or two. If they're expecting you to stay for 10 years, that would be ridiculous. But it is reasonable, right? If you put yourself in the buyer's shoes, they want you to stay for a bit, to help things go smoothly. But yeah. You do raise an important point. When you sell, you will have a new boss to an extent.
Yeah.
It's not just, is the financial deal good? Do you want them to be your new boss? I had a client who, I helped him exit about a decade ago, and he was committed for 2 years. He actually stayed for like 4 years because he loved his new role. He wasn't in charge of everything anymore. Yeah, but you need to find what's right for you.
Absolutely. So can you walk us through, you obviously work with a lot of agencies to help exit, and like $30 million exit, those are decent sized agencies.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through the key systems or processes an agency should have in place before they even think about selling? Because it takes a lot of prep work, as you know, to get ready to be sellable, sell ready. What are some of those systems, processes you need to make sure you have in place?
Well, from a client perspective, we've talked about certainly delegating client work. That also would include ideally delegating client strategy, so that as the owner or one of the owners, you're not having to do all of that. Though certainly delegate the day-to-day client work first, then perhaps the client strategy. On the pipeline perspective, the pipeline needs to be generating opportunities that are not specific to you and your reputation as the owner. That's not to say that, referrals are terrible and word of mouth is terrible, but that can't be the sole source of things, because acquirers are going to pick that up and that's going to hurt the valuation, or maybe you don't even get that offer at all. So we've got client relationships, we've got pipeline. We also have on the finance side of things, things like shifting from cash basis accounting to accrual accounting so that they can look, it's a more sophisticated look at your finances. Also cleaning up if you're doing pass-through expenses. Worked with an agency that was leasing a BMW for one of the owners, and that was getting charged as an expense to the business. That was, I guess, a legal business expense according to their CPA. It was not a critical business expense. So, if you're running things through the business expense wise, I would clean that up. And you know what? Pay yourself more, right? If you're paying the BMW lease, raise your pay by the BMW lease amount. Great. Now you're all set and you can keep the car if you want. So things like that. So clean up your finances, shifting to accrual accounting, cleaning up the pass-through expenses, and things like that. You also may be wondering, people are like, oh, well, I need to make this major one-time expense, but I'm worried it's going to hurt the EBITDA, the profitability calculations for the valuation. If you can justify it as a one-time expense, you should be fine, right? There are all kinds of add backs and adjustments and things like that. If you make clear that you're redesigning your website and you're not going to need a new website for 3 to 5 years, you can back that out of the numbers, or at least a portion of it for that year. So cleaning up your client relationships, cleaning up your pipeline, cleaning up your finances. I would also say, and this won't directly feed into systems, but what do you want to do after the exit? I ran a program about control and maximize your exit. It's now available as an on-demand training. And I surveyed the live attendees about what they'd ideally do after they exit. And interestingly, about half of the respondents said that they would start a new business. I mean, not right away, but they would go off and start a new business. Some people were looking to retire forever. Others were looking for other things. But I would think about what is your ideal exit in terms of what you're doing next, right? Don't be so focused on getting out of what you're doing now to having no idea of what's to come. Because, I've had clients who've had exits where they've gotten millions of dollars up front, and suddenly they're like, well, wait, what's the point? There's nothing like having millions of dollars in that wire transfer from your exit in terms of the money down to give you some existential crises of what now? Start thinking about that now before you have the millions of dollars and don't know what to do with it.
When you did that study, how many wanted to stay on with the new buyers?
In the neighborhood of 20%. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it was about 20%. Yeah. And I mean, for some people, they love doing the work that an agency does. They don't love running the business. That past client I mentioned from a decade ago was in that match where he basically became the CMO of the new business, and he got to do marketing and creative stuff all day long, what he had missed doing back when he was also the CEO of the agency.
Can you tell us more about that story? Because I think, when you and I were preparing to have this conversation, you had mentioned that in the most recent year, 90% of your intake form from agencies looking to work with you were looking to sell.
Yes.
And why do you think that is?
Running an agency is a hard business. It's very people-oriented. Your clients are human. Your team is human. Even as AI comes in, they're still human. And humans are complicated, right? The more people you manage, the more likely that someone's going to have some sort of a personal problem in any one week. And that can get draining over time, right? And you hear some of the same complaints and this and that. Some of that you can solve by having reasonable expectations for your team, setting boundaries about what you expect, setting expectations about what is the level of performance you need. It's especially tough for agencies that have had kind of a more permissive culture and realize they need to kind of buckle down and run things financially better, but their team has gotten used to a lax approach. Not everyone's going to make the transition to your future business that's more of a high-performance business. Of course, maybe you're high-performance already. So that can be a bit of a challenge. We can dig in on that, but first, what's your reaction to that so far?
Yeah, I think I agree. It's exhausting running a people-focused business. And something that you mentioned also was that people are tired. They're exhausted. And with this next wave of AI coming, it's daunting.
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
I mean, AI certainly is shifting things. Some of it is the shift that agencies are perceiving, but it's also shifts that people aren't hearing about, right? This is the prospective client that would have hired the agency in the past, but they don't even call, right? They're like, well, I think we can use some AI tools and maybe some in-house people and things like that. We'll figure it out. That's the sales inquiry you never even receive. That could be scary. For me in my work, I've been doing exit readiness for over a decade, but I've realized that needs to be what I lead with. One, because I've been doing it for years, but also when it comes to AI, I mean, I love using AI tools for things, but when someone is looking to sell their agency for a few million or 30 million, or I have a client whose goal in the future is to sell for over 100 million, you're probably not going to trust ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini with all of the advice you need to get that $7 or $8 or $9 million exit. So as agencies are, as you're listening, what are the services you're providing to clients? How replaceable are those by AI versus not? I mean, I wrote almost 10 years ago about how do you reposition your agency as a strategy-first agency. Part of that includes leading with strategy advice that informs all of your implementation work. Whereas if you're willing to start with implementation, you're going to be the first to get cut.
Good point.
Yeah.
Something on the strategy topic, something that agency owners ask us all the time is, can the account manager also do the strategy? What is your take on that?
They can to an extent. And some of it, agency owners will be like, how much does an account manager need to know about, the work that we do? And my answer is they need to know enough. Now, enough is going to be relative. If your agency is doing really technical work for really complex industries, enough is going to be a lot more. For instance, one of my clients works in a particular aspect of the utility industry, and almost everyone on their team came from working in-house in that particular utility industry. On the other hand, that may be less critical. For startups, for instance, there's a startup organization here in North Carolina that works with healthcare-related startups and more general technology startups. And they're known for the tech startups or will hire anyone. Whereas the healthcare side, they're like, well, if you don't have prior healthcare experience, we're not interested. So some of that depends on the industry. But can an account manager do strategy? Yes. There's a question of whether the client will respect all of the strategy advice. Years ago, I worked as an account manager, but with a project manager title. So I was doing internal project management, and I was also doing the client-facing work. And I had a client ask one day to speak with his strategist, and she was out that day. And I said, but I can help you with this. I've done this before, and I walked him through it. And his reaction was, wow, I'm surprised you knew how to do that. And I think he assumed that because of my project manager title, I didn't know how to do the work. But in fact, it was something I'd done before. So I do think that clients tend to trust strategy advice from people with a strategist title more than other roles. But at the end of the day, it's about knowing enough to advise the client, having their trust. And account managers are great at that, right? About building relationships, being the first person the client contacts, and things like that. So it's absolutely possible. Some of it'll depend on the individual client's perspective. That same client, by the way, who was like, I'm surprised you knew how to do that. He is the same client who, back when we had the office in person, if you didn't answer the phone, he would call every extension in the office to find someone.
Squeaky wheel, like we were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, which is worth considering for anyone who has a client like that. It is annoying, but it also does mean that they really value your agency's advice.
True.
Make sure you're charging enough for that.
Yeah. Inconvenience tax is what I call that.
Yeah.
Cool. Question I had for you, Carl, since you are an expert on exit ready.
Yeah.
A lot of people are nervous about hiring people fractionally for their agency if they're thinking about being exit ready. Now, for me, it didn't matter. I had a fractional CMO. We still exited, no problem, and it wasn't a concern. Yeah. Because we are fractional account managers, how do you see that when it comes to being exit ready? Is that a concern, or what should an agency owner think about when they're thinking about hiring fractional employees?
So fractional is not an inherent concern. I think the key is having a good story for how you've structured the agency, how you're staffing things, and things like that. One model that I think of is the idea of a front-end agency versus a back-end agency, or the more traditional model, which we could call full stack. So front-end is all the client-facing work, back-end is the more fulfillment, delivery-related work. What is the model you've chosen? You could choose to outsource to a white label agency, which is a great model, because then you're able to deal with the flexibility of increases in work. Great, you're sending it to your partner. You've got a decrease. Well, okay, you're adjusting for that. So I think the key is that you need a good story for what your staffing model is, and that you've been intentional about it, rather than that you've just sort of stumbled into something.
That's so important. I think people get scared off because they might hear from one person, that like, no, you have to have all full-time people, or you should have all fractional people, and that will make your business worth a lot more. But I think you're right. Your business is unique. And as long as you can show the whole picture to your potential acquirer, then that's going to add value. It doesn't need to be black or white.
Yes. And I think that's the danger of following advice based on what you read, in an article, or you hear somewhere, or, you kind of ask around and you get the sort of the free advice that people chime in, which means well, but they're not your paid advisor. Part of my work with exit readiness and my exit readiness audit is that I'm looking inside the agency from the perspective of a future acquirer. Whether you're planning to sell or not, looking at what are the valuation growth opportunities, what are the risks that the acquirer's due diligence team is going to try to use against you to lower the valuation, and then a roadmap of what to change. And that's unique to each agency. My advice is customized to each client. I could have two different clients ask the same question in a week, and I'd have different answers because their unique values, goals, and resources are different. It's about what's right for them, not a generic what's best.
Absolutely. So if somebody, agency owner, is on the fence, should I sell? Should I stay? Should I scale? What questions would you have them ask themselves?
I would start by asking, what is your long-term trajectory? What do you want from life in general? And that will help determine, do you need to sell your agency? Is this a circumstance where you keep running the agency and you delegate, or even hire fully someone to run things as the CEO? What do you want? As Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. Once you know what you want from life in general, that helps drive, is the agency helping you get there? If so, great, structure it to work. If it's not, you may decide you don't want to keep running the agency altogether. So begin with the end in mind, work backwards from there. Once you're clear on how best to reach that long-term personal goal, start shifting the agency accordingly. If you realize you need to do an exit, definitely start thinking about exit readiness. If the exit is less critical, exit readiness isn't quite as important as if you're like, I need to sell in 3 to 5 years for $10 to $12 million. But the good news is that the more optional you are in your agency and the more exit ready your agency is, the more you're going to enjoy it. The more likely you are to be able to work part-time in the business, doing part-time things that you like doing rather than what you have to do. This is also opportunities to promote your best team members. In work that I do for succession planning, helping owners step back, that usually involves promoting their best team members to become VP, managing director, president, COO, CEO. Like, they're doing well in their career, they're making more money, they're making your life easier, and you get to do what you want. Life is too short as a business owner to not do mostly what you like doing.
I agree. I totally agree. So, Karl, if anyone is listening today and this has sparked something in them and they're like, I need my paid advisor and Karl is my guy, how can they learn more and get in touch with you?
They can visit my website, sakasandcompany.com. That's SAKASAND, the word company.com. You can get in touch about one-on-one options, including the exit readiness audit or ongoing support. And there are also hundreds of free articles there. So go to sakasandcompany.com and get in touch, or get my newsletter that more than one subscriber says has told me is the only email they read every time. So glad to help.
Thank you so much, Karl, for coming on another episode.
Great to be back.
All right, we will see you on the next episode of the Happy Clients Podcast.
Cheers to happy clients.